Detective, Peer Support Lead at Disability Rights UK. I'm going to be talking to you about my top tips for engaging disabled people to become volunteers on your projects. The first thing I'd like to talk about is why it's important to engage disabled people to volunteer. Having a diverse workforce is really important because it brings together different people who've all got different kinds of unique experiences and perspectives and new ways to problem solve. Often disabled people have experienced lots of different barriers in their lives and they've overcome them, and as a result are more resilient. Having resilient people on your workforce with lots of skills and experiences can really enrich and create diversity within your staff and volunteer teams. What I'd like to talk about is what stops people from volunteering. Anything that stops someone from getting involved is called a barrier, and there are, loosely speaking, 4 different kinds. The first one is a physical barrier. So these are barriers in the built environment. An example would be a disabled person who's a wheelchair user not being able to get into a building to volunteer because there isn't a ramp and there are loads of steps. That is a physical barrier that means that person cannot volunteer in your organisation. Another kind of barrier that people can experience is attitudinal barriers, and these are negative attitudes from other staff members, other volunteers, about what the person can and can't do. So for example, if somebody turns up to volunteer at your organisation and the receptionist exhibits some confusion or degree of stress around having to work with a disabled person, this can be really off-putting. Another part of negative attitudes can come from a disabled person themselves. Often a disabled person has had lots of negative experiences around barriers, often for their whole lives, and this means that their confidence can be eroded and can be really low, and they can think that they might not be able to volunteer. Another kind of barrier is an informational barrier, and this means written information or information that's online not being accessible. Information can be in really tiny fonts, so for people with visual impairments, they can really struggle to see this. If a person has a learning difficulty, they might struggle with complicated registration forms. Often having things like pictures or easy read versions of documents can mean that someone can access these forms and means they're more likely to participate. The final kind of barrier is what we call a policy barrier. So this can be an inflexible working practice. So for example, you not giving people time off to attend hospital appointments, or understanding that someone might have what we call a fluctuating condition, which means on one day they're absolutely fine, but the following day they might not be well enough to attend college or university or work or to volunteer in your organisations. Let's talk a little bit about how you can overcome some of these barriers and how you can work towards inclusion. Inclusion is all about your services, your volunteering activities being available to everyone regardless of their ability or impairment or health condition or disability. It's about not treating everybody the same, but looking at what someone's unique needs are, the kind of barriers they're experiencing, taking time to understand them, and looking for creative ways to remove them. Often we speak to a lot of organisations who say that, oh, well, if we get some disabled volunteers in, we're going to have to make lots of adjustments and that's going to be quite expensive. The following tips I'm going to give you are relatively low cost and really easy to implement and to put into practice. Often making small changes can have huge impacts for disabled people and can mean they can volunteer within your organisations. The first tip I'm going to give you is all about communication. This is key. The person who's an expert in their condition and the barriers they're experiencing is a disabled person themselves, which is why it's really important to factor in time to get to know the volunteer and ask them the kinds of experiences they've had in the past, whether they volunteered before, what's worked well for them, what kind of barriers they've experienced, and what they think they need to be able to participate and volunteer with you. Don't make assumptions is my next tip. What works for one disabled person might not work for another disabled person, which is why it's really important to make time to ask and listen and act on what the person has told you. Don't be afraid to have open, honest conversations about support needs. Asking someone, what do you need to participate? What changes can we make that means you can take part in this opportunity can be really, really beneficial and really as a good way to start an open conversation. It's all about the person, not the impairment. Always focus on what the person can do rather than what the person can't, particularly if they're experiencing low confidence or they've never volunteered before. My next tip is make a plan. Often writing down something in a role description about what the volunteer will be doing can create really open, honest expectations of what the volunteer will be doing with your organisation. It also means that you can review it really easily, and you can ask the volunteer, perhaps in a supervision or a one-to-one informal catch-up, how's it going? What are the activities that you're enjoying doing? What can we remove from your role description that perhaps you're not enjoying? But also, as someone grows and develops, it naturally will change over time. It's really important to build this in flexibly and have time for informal chats to capture all this. Finally, the all-important welcome. When somebody turns up to volunteer for the first time, make them feel welcome, be open and honest and ready to communicate with them. Make sure your staff team are briefed and everyone's really confident and comfortable working with somebody who might have an additional support need, a disability or a health condition. You can find more tips in our Top Tips for Engaging Volunteers document. You can find this on the Disability Rights website, the address is coming up below, or the Get Out Get Active website, and also the Volunteering Matters website. I've had a great time chatting to you today. If you want to get in touch with me, my contact details are also below. Thanks for listening.